Part 2, Divine Emanations. And God said, "Let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky and over the cattle and over all of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." And God created man in his own image, in the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. Genesis 1:26-27-59 Models, keys to the mind. For before delving into mystical principles and concepts, it is necessary to understand the significance attached in Kabbalah to the formulation of models and their use in creating correspondences between various facets of reality. Kabbalah uses models and correspondences in order to excite our minds and hearts, unlocking hidden talents and emotions and correcting our negative habits. Correspondence. In the later books of the Bible, the word Kabbalah is used in the sense of acceptance, or receptivity. Hence, since the Middle Ages, it has been used to describe the hidden tradition carefully received, and then transmitted, from generation to generation. However, in the 5 books of Moses, one the essential source of meaning for every Hebrew word, Kabbalah means correspondence. How did the grammatical root of correspondence come to denote the act of receiving? The answer to this question points us to what is perhaps the deepest reason that so many people are today drawn to Kabbalah, our longing to be like God. God's purpose, as stated explicitly in the book of Psalms, was that mankind embody, that is receive, his essence. God said you, mankind are Elukim. 2. God created mankind with a yearning that he be able to transfer his benevolent essence to us. The primordial serpent built his case for enticing Eve into eating from the forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge, of good and evil, on the allure of embodying God's essence. It claimed that by eating from the tree of knowledge, you, mankind shall become 60. What you need to know about Kabbalah: like Elukim, conscious of good and evil. 3. Because Adam and Eve ate from the forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge, their knowledge consciousness did indeed alter to include moral categories like good and evil, but in the process they also lost the higher consciousness upon which the transfer and embodiment of God's essence was dependent. As a result, they were banished from the Garden of Eden. 26 generations later, 26 is also the numerical value of God's essential name, Havaya. The children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, led by Moses out of their bondage in Egypt, merited to receive the consciousness-altering and refining Torah at Mount Sinai. The Torah states explicitly, in the third to last of its 613 commandments, that we are commanded to emulate the Almighty. The simple meaning of this cherished goal of life is that we adopt the Almighty's attributes of loving-kindness, patience, charity, etc. Achieving this requires that we share God's thought and his perspective on reality, though naturally there has been debate between the sages of the Torah as to what extent this is possible. Indeed, by studying the Torah, both in its revealed and concealed aspects, we come to align, or calibrate our consciousness such that it matches that of the Almighty. By doing so, we are able to receive and reveal our particular portion of the divine in a positive and constructive manner, for clearly, the Almighty's infinite nature makes it impossible for a finite and limited human being to emulate him completely. Rational and philosophical thought would therefore leave our consciousness forever separate and severed from that of our creators, making any similarity impossible. Nonetheless, we cannot completely ignore the fact that God's original purpose in creating human beings was that we indeed be like him. And this, God's statement of purpose, continually gnaws at these would-be bonds that the non-mystical conception of reality would like to place on our minds and hearts. With the hurdles imposed by rationality set aside for the moment, let us ask, how can our minds be shaped such that they? Chapter 4, Models, Keys to the Mind. 61. Become a worthy vessel to reveal God's essence? How can our limited being become a vessel for embodying the divine essence? The answer lies in this special way of thinking about, organizing, and understanding our world, known as thinking in correspondences, the core of the Kabbalistic methodology. God's signature Kabbalah seeks to reveal our deepest essence, unite it with the divine, and thus unlock our deepest potential as human beings. To do so, we must be adept at using the infinite wisdom of the Torah's inner dimension to find God's signature, as it were, in every aspect of ourselves and the world around us. The Talmud explains that the Almighty is like a painter who signs his name on every work he completes. God has signed his name on every facet of the universe, regardless of how big or how small. Like a traditionally minded painter, sometimes the signature used by the Almighty turns out to actually be one of His holy names, thereby making them a root model for many Kabbalistic correspondences. Still, many other correspondences not directly based on God's names are used in Kabbalah. Some of these will be covered in this book. To uncover God's signature, Kabbalah uses models that form the basis for setting up correspondences. A correspondence may be made between the parts of the human body and the letters of God's name, between the 10 plagues in Egypt and the 10 Sephirot, and so forth. Though using correspondences to calibrate the mind was used from the very first stages of the revelation of Kabbalah, it was the Arizal who made it into the cornerstone of the Kabbalistic methodology. In fact, correspondences are so integral to the study of Kabbalah, that it is impossible to engage in its study at even the most basic level without learning about them, their formulation, and their use. 62. What you need to know about Kabbalah. A correspondence in Kabbalah can be as simple as the interpretation of a symbol. This would be a one-dimensional correspondence. We will give examples of such symbolism as the chapter proceeds. But more often than not, a correspondence is multifaceted and is presented as a model that contains many elements. Every correspondence seeks to both order and translate, or map, elements from one frame of reference to another. As a first example, let us offer one of the simplest models introduced in a less esoteric text, the Talmud. The sages explain that the soul, as it resides in the body, has 5 different properties, 5 which correspond to the 5 properties of the Almighty as He dwells in the world. 6. The sages learnt this correspondence from the fact that in chapters 103 and 104 of Psalms, the phrase "May my soul praise God" is repeated 5 times. That the soul can praise God seems to imply that there is some similarity between them. The 5 parts of the correspondence are as follows, in the order in which they appear in the Talmud. The soul God fills the entire body, fills the entire world, sees but cannot be seen, sees but cannot be seen, nourishes the entire body, nourishes the entire world, is pure, sits in an inner chamber, sits in an inner chamber. The meaning and significance of each of these properties is worthy of elaboration, which we will defer for the present. For the moment, let us concentrate on the underlying structure of this correspondence. First, we note that it has 5 parts. Elsewhere, based on the same observation, that the phrase "May my soul praise God" appears 5 times in chapters 103 and 104 of Psalms, the sages teach that the soul has 5 names, which are, the singular one, Yekada, the living one, Chaya, chapter 4, models. Keys to the mind. 63. Soul, Neshama, spirit, Ruach, Anima, Nefesh. Amazingly, though not stated explicitly in any Kabbalistic text, the sum of the numerical values of all 5 names of the soul, in Hebrew, is exactly equal to the numerical value of the phrase which is repeated 5 times, "May my soul praise God." Equals 1099. Since the soul has 5 properties and 5 names, it is obvious that there is a one-to-one correspondence between them. In this case, knowing which name corresponds to which property is the fruit of laborious study over the various meanings and connotations of the names themselves. To aid the construction of the model, it is necessary to first correlate each set of 5 components with the most basic Kabbalistic model that has 5 components, the essential name of the Almighty, Havaya. Though Havaya has only 4 letters, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, Kabbalah explains that a certain calligraphic mark on the first letter, the Yud, called the tip of the Yud, Kutsoshal Yud, represents a 5th, concealed component, while each of the 4 explicit letters of the name represent 4 revealed components. These 5 components of God's essential name, Havaya, form a basic template to which every 5-tiered model can be applied, including our own 2 examples, the names of the soul and its properties. Both correspond to the 5 components of God's essential name. But how do they correspond? Which property corresponds to which letter of the name Havaya? To correctly correspond 2 similarly structured models is the heart of the art of contemplative Kabbalah, and requires years of study and an inner sense for parallels, described in the Talmud as the ability to find the similar in 2 things, Ladamat Milta Milta, 7. But once the model has been constructed correctly, it becomes spiritually alive and can provide a basis for deep contemplation and meditation on its subject. 64. What you need to know about Kabbalah. In all, the final correspondence of all three sets of 5 components follows the order of the properties of the soul as listed in the Talmud, beginning with the correspondence to the lowest level of the soul, the anima, letter of Havaya, name of the soul, property of the soul, tip of Yod. The singular one dwells in an inner chamber. Yod, the living one, is pure. Hey, soul nourishes the body. Vav, spirit sees and is not seen. Hey, anima fills the body. Once the components of a correspondence have been ordered according to a Kabbalistic model, the correspondence becomes an invitation to understand, explore, and innovate. Perhaps the best way to understand the role of the model is to liken it to a key. This key is not for a physical lock but for opening still secured areas of the mind. Because of the nature of the mind, Kabbalistic models are always holographic, a more advanced topic that we will not cover in this introductory text. Once a Kabbalistic model is inserted into the mind, it acts as like a key that has been inserted into a lock. A new door is opened. The mind opens and becomes aware of a new way to see the world and its inner structure. People, events, and places that had previously seemed dissociated and confusing, suddenly yield new levels of connection and meaning. Kabbalistic models and the imagination. Thus, Kabbalah is always interested in understanding God's relationship and perspective on creation and is concerned with explaining various correspondences and parallelisms implicit within existence. In so doing, Kabbalistic discourse develops, molds, and deepens our powers of association, which are responsible for envisioning that which the physical eye cannot see. Chapter 4, Models, Keys to the Mind. 65. By molding our powers of imagination and association, Kabbalah serves a central role in rectifying it. 9. An unchecked imagination tends to invite fantasies that are aimed at gratifying the baser drives, but the study of Kabbalah employs it in the service of the spiritual instincts, using it to imagine an array of harmonious connections within reality, as well as connections between God and His creation. The origin of the Kabbalistic templates. We are now better prepared to appreciate the methodology of the master Kabbalists who formulated their insights in the form of correspondences and by inserting these models into their minds, developed their relationship with God, bringing His essence further into their lives. As mentioned above, the templates employed in Kabbalah are rooted in its very origins, even though it was the Arizal who brought their use to full fruition. The first sentence of the first Kabbalistic work, Sefer Yetzirah, describes the 3 most basic templates, comprising 4, 10, and 22 parts, respectively, with 32 wondrous pathways of wisdom, God, Havaya, engraved. He created His world with 3 books, a scribe, a book, and a story. God's essential name, Havaya, comprises 4 letters and is the first template. The 32 wondrous pathways of wisdom divide into the 10 Sephirot, the emanations of divine light and energy, which will be reviewed in chapters 6 and 7, and the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. 10 together, they are the building blocks with which the Creator, Havaya, created, and continually recreates, the world. Thus, we have in this opening sentence a description of the 3 most basic templates used in Kabbalah. To analyze and order something that has 4 levels or components, the classic frame of reference in Kabbalah is the essential 4-letter name of God, Havaya, as we 66. What you need to know about Kabbalah. Saw in our example above, the name Havaya also serves as the template for a 5-component model. To analyze and order a subject that has 10 components, Kabbalah uses the template of the 10 Sephirot. For a subject with 22 components, the template of choice is the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. The second part of this opening sentence describes these 3 templates using more symbolic and literary language. The 3 primordial books of creation it refers to, a scribe, a book, and a story, correspond to these same template models, of 4, of 10 and of 22 components. The scribe is the Almighty Himself, who is the author of the book of creation, and whose 4-letter essential name is sealed at its every level. The book is creation itself, which is inherently modeled using the 10 Sephirot, which in turn can be revealed to be inscribed on every page of the book of creation, that is, the Torah. The story told in the book of creation is related using the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, making Hebrew the ideal language for describing our reality, spiritual as well as physical, natural, along with human. In the following chapters we will take a deeper look at these three most fundamental models, or templates. We will begin our examination with the 22 Hebrew letters, then turn to the 10 Sephirot, and finally, in part 3 of this book, to the 4 letters of God's essential name, Havaya, as well as his other names and connotations, all of which derive ultimately from his 4-letter name. Notes. 1. Exodus 26:5, the corresponding loops shall be, like a woman toward her sister. These corresponding loops, when clasped together, joined the 2 sections of the covering draped over the tabernacle that, in the Holy of Holies, housed the Ark of the Covenant. 2. Psalms 82:6. 3. Genesis 3:5. Chapter 4, Models Keys to the Mind. 67:4. The Hebrew word can be translated in 3 ways: knowledge, consciousness, and perspective. Thus the tree of knowledge is also the tree of consciousness and the tree of perspective. Knowledge, consciousness, and perspective denote 3 steps in the fulfillment of the commandment to be like God. Knowledge refers to the objectivity that today is most prevalent in science and serves to free us from false beliefs and primitive fears, both examples of idol worship. Knowledge thus serves to elevate our conception of our surroundings, in turn permitting us to elevate them. Consciousness refers to the subjective recognition of our own souls. Whereas it can be the basis of an egotistic attitude, when used incorrectly, the humanity revealed by subjectivity is what allows us to connect with other souls. Perspective refers to the Almighty's perspective on reality. What he sees is not what we see. Of Moses the Torah says, "And he saw God's picture," Numbers 12:8, which in Chassanet is explained to mean that Moses was able to see our reality from God's own perspective. This is the highest state of resembling the Almighty that a human being can reach. 5. See also the mystery of marriage, pages 14 to 19. 6. Baratra 10a. 7. Ebed 19a, Yavamat 109b. On the difficulty of corresponding things correctly, see Shulchan Aruch Yordai 124:19. On the role of correspondence see the Alter Rebbe's Likutei Torah, Shir Hashirim 42d. 8. This correspondence was explained in the Hebrew volume Isa Inai, pages 120-7. The advanced reader is referred there. 9. See the mystery of marriage, ch. 2. 10. 4, 10, and 22 form a quadratic series whose base is 6, 4, 10, 22, 6, 12, 6, 68. What you need to know about Kabbalah: finding the numbers preceding 4, we see that the series mirrors itself. 22 10 4 4 10 22-12-6 06 12 6 6 6 6, implying that the 4 letters of God's essential name, the 10 Sephirot, and the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet mirror the congruent but hidden aspects of reality. 69 letters, building blocks of the universe. 5. Kabbalah, even at the most introductory level, requires familiarity with the Hebrew alphabet. To study Kabbalah in depth, one must also be able to read and understand basic texts like the Bible and the Mishnah. Though Hebrew was not a spoken language for almost 1500 years, during that time scholars of the Torah, including Kabbalists, wrote some of the most magnificent Hebrew texts in existence. Consequently, to study the Torah in general and Kabbalah in particular, speaking Hebrew is not as necessary as being able to correctly read and understand it. As befitting an introductory text, we have kept our instruction of Hebrew to a minimum, and have tried to stress those aspects of the language that reveal its mystical and creative power. The Hebrew alphabet 1, called the Aleph Bet, after its first 2 letters, comprises 22 letters. These letters are all consonants. Vowels are generally indicated with diacritical marks above, beneath, or after letters. However, 4 of the 22 consonants are used to indicate vowel sounds as well. Each letter possesses a numerical value, which is very significant in understanding the hidden meaning of each word. Indeed, Hebrew words and phrases can be compared based on their numerical values. This technique is called gematria, and is one of the cornerstones of Kabbalistic analysis and thought. 570. What you need to know about Kabbalah. Sefer Yetzirah explains that the 22 Hebrew letters are the basic energy building blocks of creation, whose combinations and permutations represent all the creative forces that God used when He, as it were, spoke creation into being. Kabbalah teaches that words formed by combinations and permutations of letters are the vessels through which the creative process continues to take place. Hebrew, unlike Roman languages like English, is logically structured. It begins with 22 letters that act as the building blocks. These 22 letters then join to form 231 sharim, gates. Finally, 3-letter shorashim, roots, are formed from the gates. Every single word in Hebrew is based on a letter, gate or root, with a predominant majority being directly based on a root. Thus, to truly understand the underlying logic and meaning of a word in Hebrew, it is necessary to reconstruct its root. Sefer Yetzirah also divides the 22 Hebrew letters into the following 3 groups based on both grammatical and spiritual considerations. 3 mother letters, 7 double letters, 12 simple letters. The various letters are further identified with corresponding elements, such as fire and water, with corresponding gifts, such as wisdom and wealth, with corresponding senses, such as hearing and sight, as well as with corresponding body parts. The 3 mother letters, Aleph, Mem, and Shin, correspond to the 3 primal elements of creation, air, water, and fire respectively, and to the 3 general divisions of the body. Chest corresponds to air, abdomen to water, and head to fire. Letter element part of body Aleph, air chest Mem, water abdomen Shin, fire head. Chapter 5, Letters building blocks of the universe. 71 The 7 double letters, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Kaf, Pei, Resh, Tav, correspond in the body to the 7 gateways of the head. Each one serves as a gateway for one of the senses of sight, hearing, smell, and taste, the sensations of external reality, allowing them to enter the consciousness of the psyche. Each gateway, when sanctified, also serves as a portal through which to receive a divine gift or blessing as follows. Letter gift gateway Bet. Wisdom right eye Gimel. Wealth right ear Dalet. Children right nostril Kaf. Life left eye Pei. Sovereignty left ear Resh. Peace left nostril Tav. Grace mouth. The 12 simple letters, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yud, Lamed, Nun, Samek, Awin, Zadik, Kuf, correspond to 12 limbs and organs of the body. Each controls, often in a most mysterious way, for no overt relationship is apparent, a spiritual faculty of the soul, also the particularized talent of each of the 12 tribes of Israel. Letter faculty limb organ He. Speech, expression right leg Vav. Thought right kidney Zayin. Walking, progress left leg Chet. Sight, perception right hand Tet. Hearing, comprehension left kidney Yud. Action, rectification left hand Lamed. Touch, sexuality gallbladder Nun. Smell, sensitivity intestine Samek. Sleep, dreaming lower bowels Awin. Anger, indignation liver Zadik. Eating, taste stomach Kuf. Laughter, exuberance spleen 72. What you need to know about Kabbalah.